Welcome to Mad About Money. I'm Maddy Alexander-Grout, and this is the podcast where we talk about amazing people in amazing money stories. I'm here with the lovely Kate Hall, who is from the Full Freezer, and Kate knows everything about freezer food. It's amazing. She is literally the person that I find out my freezer money saving tips from Kate. So, Kate, tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Hi, Maddie. Thanks for having me. So, as you said, my name's Kate Hall, and I basically help people to reduce their food waste and save money and eat more or cook more easily from scratch, I suppose, by using their home freezers more effectively. So rather than it being about batch cooking, which I did used to do and I used to love, it's more about freezing individual ingredients. So if you've bought something with good intentions, it's like, I'm going to eat better this week. I've bought all this fruit and veg. And then you can see it's going to end up going in the bin because you've just not got round to it. Plans have changed, whatever it is. I basically help people to preserve either whether it's fruit and vegetables, but it could be even stuff out of the cupboard. So things you've used a part of a jar of, or you've opened half a pack of wraps and not going to use them all, whatever it is. So that they can avoid those things going to waste, so they can use them another day. So it's niche, but it applies to a lot of people.
Yeah, it does. I have never ever thought about freezing a jar of something.
Yeah, so
not in a million years. We go through pesto after pesto. That's a great idea.
Pesto is one of the biggest ones that I get a response to whenever I mention it on my social media, because obviously you only ever really need like a tablespoon at a time. And you literally, if you just decant it out into an ice cube tray, and then you've got about a tablespoon measured that you can just bring out of the freezer when you need it. And if you want it cold, you can defrost it in the fridge, but otherwise you just whack it in the pan with, assuming you're having it with pasta or something, just whack it in the pan, heat it through.
It goes moldy so quickly, doesn't it? And it says, you've got to consume it within 3 days of opening it. And it's like, well, that's not going to happen.
That's it. And I find there are two types of people. There are the people who will just scrape the mold off and go, oh, it's fine.
Or I'm kind of one of those people.
There are the people who go, well, I'm not sure. And because I'm not sure, even the thought of eating that thing makes me feel a little bit nauseous. So I'm not going to risk it, which is more where I tend to fall. And if something is the best before date, that's absolutely fine. Like, as long as it looks okay to eat, then that's not a problem. If it's got a use by date, if you're not going to eat it before then, making sure you freeze it before it can just give you so much more confidence that it's like, I know the food's safe, nothing needs to go to waste, and I don't need to put my health at risk either.
Absolutely, because especially now, I guess you're probably more busy now that they've stopped taking use by dates off, because what's the measure? Like, how do you know when to eat something by?
Completely. I mean, I find it really fascinating actually, because I initially, when I heard the news that they're taking off the best before dates off fruits and vegetables and some yogurts and things as well, but that is fantastic. What amazing news, because a lot of food is just wasted because you see, oh, there's a best before date, oh no, it's past its best, I need to chuck it, which is not the case.
No.
But
good old sniff test.
Well, yeah, as long as it's not a use by date. Sniff test doesn't work for a use by date, so don't just sniff your chicken because it could make you sick, even if it doesn't smell.
Okay, good tip.
Yeah, but basically that anything with a use by date is more likely to have what's called pathogenic bacteria in it, which doesn't have a scent, it's basically like E. coli, salmonella.
Oh shit, okay.
You can't know if they've grown in your food. It's spoilage bacteria that makes things smell or go slimy or moldy, which is what we recognize as like the things that's gone off. So if it's used by, don't sniff test. If it's a best before, sniff test, use your senses, absolutely fine. But I thought, brilliant, like, we're going to reduce food waste by not having all these unnecessary labels on things. But I have found a lot of people have commented on the fact that the fruit and veg doesn't seem to be lasting as long. So I don't, I'm not on the inside with the supermarkets. I don't know that there's any, anything going on there, but it does feel a bit like, well, actually, are we being given slightly older produce? And therefore people are turning to my content more because they're finding stuff isn't lasting in the fridge as long either. So if they can make it last a bit longer in the freezer, then, you know, they know that they're fine to buy that fruit and veg. It doesn't matter if there's not a date or whatever on it, or they can buy the multi-pack, and make sure they don't waste any of it, basically.
Yeah, I mean that is absolutely great advice. What sort of things have use by dates on them rather than best befores? Is it
So
usually just meat?
it's usually things like meat, but you will also find things like bagged salad. Like salad can
Yes.
actually make you really sick, because
Oh God, yes, it can.
it's one of the worst things. And it's thinking about how produce is grown. So
Mm,
if bacteria could be in the water source that is that's feeding, you know, and growing the fruits and vegetables and things, so things like spinach, you know, there's risks there, of things being in crevices, shall we say,
ugh,
and to wash out. So it's why it's really important to, you know, wash your fruit, your veg, things like that. But yeah, it is, I mean, it's predominantly meat, and then your things like your bagged salad, and then you might have things as well, that are sort of some dairy products, like coleslaw, sort of
yeah,
thing, which unfortunately not great for freezing. But you know, sometimes with even, there are products like dairy products that have use by dates on them, and it's very questionable as to why they have a use by date, because things like milk, it could be to do with the production process, so it's always worth checking. But it's really interesting seeing a lot of supermarkets are actually switching from use by dates on things like milk or yogurt or cheese to having best before dates or best within dates. So it's a really good idea, basically, whenever you are unloading your shopping, just having a little nosy to see, is it a best before, is it a use by? And my mum actually has a hack of, she'll stick a big white label on things and write the date in bigger letters.
oh, that's a good idea.
So
Ah,
thing that it's, you know, that's why I freeze so much, because things would always get buried in my fridge, and I'd go, oh,
yeah,
I've got ages to eat those eggs or that mozzarella or whatever it is. They would be the things that would go to waste in our house, because the dates weren't that obvious and I felt like I had loads of time. But of course, we all know how quickly the weeks go by.
absolutely. And within the Mad About Money app, there is a freezer tracker. So you can actually write down all of the things that you buy on a freezer tracker, print it off, stick it on your cupboard, and then you know what stuff. Because the thing is, like, variant guidelines, right, on how long to freeze things for as well. What are your tips on that?
So I have a bit of a bugbear with the whole, how long can I freeze something for? Because if your freezer is cold enough, you can freeze it for ages. Like if it's
I mean,
minus,
dead bodies are right. You know,
like
I've
think,
still got one from last Christmas, the Christmas before.
it's honestly like, if it's minus 18 degrees C or colder, bacteria can't grow.
Okay.
As long as it won't kill it, which is why people have to be careful when they're defrosting foods and stuff. But as long as the food's been looked after properly before it was frozen, and it was in good nick before it was frozen, and as long as, if you're defrosting it, you defrost it safely and you reheat it thoroughly if you're cooking it and stuff like that, then it should be absolutely fine. It should be safe to eat.
And what about freezer burn?
Well, that's the thing, that the
Mm,
longer things are in the freezer for, the more the quality will deteriorate. So freezer burn, for anyone listening that is unsure, it's where you get that kind of mottled, very unattractive kind of look. And it is usually things like meat that you'll see it on,
yeah,
things like chicken breasts. You might have actual frost on the outside of the food and it looks really unpleasant. It's essentially where the moisture is coming out of the food and it's moving to the colder parts of the freezer. So it's dehydrating the
yeah,
food. So it won't make you sick, it's not going to make you poorly, but it doesn't make the food very nice. So a rule of thumb I would go for is try and eat things within sort of 3 to 6 months. Keep rotating the stock. If it's been longer than 6 months, don't panic. Like, don't throw something away just because it's got a bit of frost on it or it's a little bit freezer burnt. I will do things like, if I had a bit of chicken that was a little bit freezer burnt, I'd put it in a curry or in a stew where it's less noticeable.
yes, yeah.
Just bin it. But I am going to add in the proviso, if you defrost something and it smells really funky and it is slimy and horrible and disgusting, please do not eat it.
No. I think you've got to use a little bit of common sense here.
Yeah.
I mean, eggs. I didn't know you could freeze eggs. I mean, now I'm not going to be freezing any eggs because yesterday I found out that I'm intolerant to them, which is
Oh
not nice.
no.
Eggs, wheat. I've got a whole host of things. Eggs, wheat, dairy,
Oh.
linseed oil, and oats. I'm like, brilliant. So I'm going to be living on carrots forever. Like, can you freeze carrots?
Yes, yeah, you can. Absolutely. In all forms, tubed,
Amazing.
treated, but I do tend to have my carrots grated in porridge, which I think, I shared
I
on.
saw that and I said, I saw that on your Instagram. And I thought, oh, I'm going to try that. Clearly not anymore because I
Not
can't.
anymore. No porridge for you.
I was like, someone's got to have a pancake recipe because I'm in pancake day. I'm completely screwed. Like, I can't have the flour, I can't have the eggs, I can't have the milk.
Yeah, no.
Pancakes are my favorite thing ever. Like, but I am going to have a week of like, I've started, but I said to James, I was like, I need to have a Domino's before we start this. Like,
Definitely get it out of your system first. I've been gluten-free for about, oh God, I don't know, 13 years. And I
oh.
really wish that I'd indulged a lot more before I cut it all out, because
So, how do you feel about that now? And also, what are your tips for finding gluten-free things on a budget? Because I find that, the free from sections are really expensive, aren't they?
yeah, they are. I mean, I would say my way is really to cook from scratch quite a lot.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
people are going to be like, oh no, because it is a hard transition, but things like having rice, which is naturally gluten-free.
Yeah.
I do use gluten-free pasta, but I'll do things like put more veg in so that I don't have to use as much pasta. Try
That's
and
a good idea.
bulk things out. But yeah, we have an awful lot of rice noodles, not a huge amount of pasta because, as you say, it's really expensive.
Expensive, yeah.
And then potatoes, sweet potatoes. Like I just
There's no law against having like pasta and potatoes in the same dish, is there? I don't know why people don't do it more often.
you can totally do that. But it is, yeah, I find that there are things like gluten-free wraps, but they're not great.
No.
The best advice I can give really is to find some amazing social media superstars. So there's like Healthy Living James and Becky Excel are both do gluten-free recipes that are just absolutely to die for.
Oh, brilliant. Okay.
I would say if people, this isn't so, although actually her recipe might be dairy free, but it's got eggs in it, so you can't have it anyway. I'm gonna say her Yorkshire pudding recipe. Oh my gosh, I was just like,
Oh wow. Yeah, you see, eggs was the thing that came out the highest. And I was like, oh, that's really not great. Like eggs eggs are in most things,
yeah.
so that's not great. But then I have had a lot of people who have gone, oh yeah, they're like these food intolerance tests are a bit of a farce. And I'm like, do you know what? I'm just gonna go because the lady I'm dealing with is absolutely lovely. And I'm just gonna try and cut some things out for a bit.
Just
I
see.
think I'm going to eat more healthily anyway because I'm going to eat less processed stuff. I'm going to eat less crap.
I think that's the thing, that when you get a sort of when you find out you need to cut things out, it is hard initially. And actually, the one thing I would say to people if they found out they're gluten-free is do not all of a sudden switch to eating loads of gluten-free bread, because one, it's really expensive, and two, it's really unhealthy.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, because so many of the alternative gluten-free products, because they don't have gluten in them, and your normal sort of, they don't have the normal process of baking. They have to shove it full of sugar and salt and, to give it any kind of flavour.
True, yeah.
So learning to do things yourself is really good. But like the flour blends now, like Dove Farm flour I use, or you can use corn flour for stuff. There's so many things you can use instead.
Do you make your own bread then?
No, I just
don't be silly.
I don't have that kind of time. I don't eat bread very often anymore.
No.
But I'd say that, getting into the habit of cooking more from scratch, and especially like if you start to use your freezer so that the way that I cook tends to be, I'll buy a load of fresh ingredients. I will have things in the fridge. If there are things that I know just they're not going to get eaten in the next day or two, and they are going to go off, like if I had prawns or something, then I might freeze those immediately. But I tend to, throughout the week, look at the fridge each day and go, right, that's not going to make it. That's not going to make it. I can freeze those bits, but I'll do it whilst I'm cooking dinner. So it's like I'll be in the kitchen anyway, or, you know, I think Sunday morning, I did porridge, and it was like, right, whilst my porridge is microwaving, I've got some cherry tomatoes, spring onions, and some broccoli. I'm just going to chop these up and get them in the freezer whilst that's cooking. So it's that thing of, rather than thinking, oh, I've got all these ingredients, now I need to spend loads of time cooking.
It's about the preparation and the organising.
That's it. And separating that prep from the cooking, because then when you go to cook in the evening, sometimes you're cooking from scratch, but sometimes you're just going, what do we fancy? Right, handful of this, handful of that, just chuck it in a pan.
I love that idea.
Like,
and it's such a good use of vegetables as well, so that you're kind of mixing stuff up. And if you pre-portion stuff, just get it, you know, just chuck it in. Like, you don't even really need to defrost it, do you, if you're making like a stir fry or something?
That's it. I with vegetables, I recommend not defrosting, because you'll get more bite to them if you just chuck them in the pan. Yeah, it's really nice, and you can't tell they're frozen.
And actually probably cheaper than buying your own frozen vegetables.
In some cases,
in some cases, yeah.
It's really interesting. I did a price comparison recently, and I'm going to try and weave in some social media content around it, because I found it really interesting that basically the more processed the frozen fruit or veg is, the more expensive it tends to be. So if you think something like frozen pineapple has had to all be the skin removed and
dismantled and stuff,
that's it, that's quite expensive versus buying a pineapple, doing it yourself. Things like raspberries, I think it's something that, I think when I looked at it, it was something like a kilo of frozen raspberries was like £6 or £7, which obviously is quite expensive anyway, but berries are expensive. But fresh, you were looking at more like £10 or £11.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, dependent on how you're going to use them. If you're going to put them in a smoothie, or if you're going to put them in porridge or bake something with them, just buy the frozen ones.
Just buy the frozen. Yeah, absolutely.
But if you've got something that's processed, so things like onions, I will chop and freeze myself, because it's far more cost effective for me to do that usually. Prices do fluctuate and change sometimes. But, you know, there's a lot of veggies where, you look at the frozen price, and it's also, I think about the texture, because although I fully endorse buying frozen prepped fruit or veg if it fits with your lifestyle, if the product works for you, then it's a brilliant time.
Stuff like mango's a bit weird frozen, isn't it? Like,
and that's the thing, that it's like buying it shop bought frozen, you might not be keen on it if you're just eating it, like if you're thawing and just eating, or if you know, chopping it into smaller bits, and actually you can eat a lot of things still frozen. But if you freeze them yourself, there's a definite difference. Things like broccoli, if you've tried frozen broccoli in the shop and gone, oh, but it's all battered and, you know, it's a bit watery and I'm not sure.
You have to whack it to get it
separated. That's it. And it's like, it's not broccoli as we know it when you buy it fresh. If you freeze it yourself, you can retain the quality, because you can freeze it open on a tray and individual pieces, and they actually look really quite pretty.
They do. That's super interesting. So Kate, is there anything that you wouldn't freeze?
There's not a lot. Things like emulsion sauces, so mayonnaise, like hollandaise, that kind of sauce will basically separate, and you can't put them back together. It's not very nice. I did have somebody ask me about freezing jelly, which you can freeze the jelly, but if you defrost it, you'll end up with a soggy mess. You have to almost eat it like still frozen,
like a dessert
kind of a thing. And then really it's things like I wouldn't freeze takeaway food unless
rice is bad and stuff like that, isn't it?
Yeah, that's really bad. If it was cooked, if you know it's cooked fresh, if you're like mates with your local takeaway owner
Mm,
and you know that they've cooked it completely from scratch using raw ingredients and it's not been reheated before it got to you, that's fine. But I just would never, I'd never risk freezing something that had come from a kitchen that wasn't my own unless I
no.
knew it was like, yeah, this has just been cooked. Because you shouldn't reheat things more than once, basically, and you don't know how long it's sat at room temperature for, and
Yeah, and that makes sense.
but
No.
yeah, but there's not a lot else. Aside, there might be certain meals that wouldn't freeze overly well because of when you reheat them, they might go a bit mushy. But when it comes to individual ingredients, I freeze. I will certainly try to freeze pretty
Everything.
much everything. And then it's just a question of, as long as you do that safely, it's just a question of the quality and how you use it after it's been frozen, really.
Yeah, I love it. And it's such a great, it's not only a great way to save money, it's a great way to reduce food waste, to save the environment. I love everything that you do. Kate, it's been a pleasure to have you on. Where can people find you?
The best thing really is to just pop the full freezer into a search engine, because I should pop up on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok, I've got a website, and it's all under the full freezer basically. So yeah, whichever is your preferred platform, you can pretty much find me there.
Amazing. Well, if you guys are listening to this on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, you are more than definitely in the wrong place. You need to be listening to this podcast in the Mad About Money app. It is the UK's first ever finance platform that helps people wherever they are in their journey, whether they are in debt, whether they're saving for something specific, whether they're investing, whether they're on a millionaire who's built a multi-million pound business. We want all of you people in there because it helps to make the community a better place. Kate, thank you so much for being on. I'm Maddy Alexander-Grout. This has been Mad About Money. We'll see you next week.